to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Monday, July 6, 2015, getting into the new month here, getting into July. We have oodles of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. Tom is sitting in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And obviously, looking back over this last weekend, it was rather calm and quiet. Very, very few illegal fireworks here in Hawaii. I guess because people just aren't that enthusiastic about America anymore. There was a very spectacular professional show over the Missouri, which was great. We just sat out on our back porch and watched that with our ginger beer. But remember, all last week we had the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the National Security Agency, former head of the CIA were all out there saying, ISIS coming to get you. There's going to be a terror attack on the 4th of July. Oh, there's going to be a terror. And, of course, it didn't happen. They were crying wolf again. Wolf, 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 trying to keep you all scared. So I think right now they're batting basically 0-40 at predicting these large, gigantic terrorist attacks. And, of course, the problem, they're in a corner. Had there been a gigantic boom someplace in the United States of America, the first thing people are going to think is, well, obviously the FBI and the CIA and the DHS and the NSA and the TSA can't protect us, so let's shut them down, fire those people, or take those people and send them out to fill in the potholes on the highways and turn those buildings into low-income housing. So it's kind of a stuck situation. The more they fearmonger, the more they're discrediting themselves here. All righty, obviously the big news over the weekend, the Greeks voted no on the European Union imposed austerity package. Remember how going into Sunday the media was saying, it's neck and neck, we can't tell, it's too close to call, which signaled an effort to try and hijack the Greek referendum the way the Scottish independence referendum had been stolen. But by midday on Sunday, they were having to back off and say, yes, it's a landslide for no. The official numbers are 61%, almost two-thirds. Rejected the European Union economic slavery. May have even been higher than that because there are reports of massive vote fraud taking place all over Greece in favor of the bankers. And Greece has had a long history of stolen elections favoring the European Union bankers. So it may have even been higher, may have been 75%. But whatever it was enough of a landslide where the vote riggers couldn't derail it. And everybody's out there celebrating, huzzah, huzzah. It's a blow for democracy. And basically everybody is looking to Greece right now as an inspiration. They're working to free their nation from the private central bank debt slavery system. Once again, Greece is leading the world into the idea of democracy. Now, the media, of course, has a job to make it look like Greece is bad, Greece is wrong, Greece is, they rejected the rescue package. Oh, the European bankers were trying so hard to save Greece. No, they weren't. They're the ones who put Greece in this mess, not to mention every other nation where they hold sway. Their goal is to plunge the nation into hopelessly unpayable debt in order to rule it. And Greece didn't refuse austerity so much as they refused to go on being debt slaves. That's really what was going on, and we should support them. Now, everyone's talking about the possibility that there's going to be a new deal with Greece and the Troika following the referendum. Everybody said we're not even going to talk anymore until the referendum was over, and now that Tsipras has a public mandate to walk away from the EU, that the IMF and the ECB will soften their stance. They can't. They're trapped. The referendum is irrelevant to the fact that the money junkies can't cut Greece's debt, interest, or payments without every other member nation of the European Union in equal financial trouble standing up and demanding exactly the same thing. The contagion from this is as much political as it is economic. Greece's victory is giving the rest of the world bad ideas. Those Those slaves out there, they're getting the idea they can vote themselves free. And the media is out there spinning as much as possible to make the bankers look good and Greece look bad. Because their goal out there is to convince us all that not being a slave to the bankers is going to be worse than being a slave to the bankers. Really, being a slave to the central banks is preferable to life without their benefits. So forth and so on here. Now, the media has been caught in a lot of fraud. As you're probably aware, going into the vote, there were all these pictures all over the media about bare supermarket shelves and how hard it was going to be. And it turns out those photos were staged. The corporate media photographers went into the store, emptied the shelves, took the picture, put the stuff back, walked on out. Now, you've also been hearing all this story about if the Greeks voted no, the next step would be for the Greek banks to start confiscating savings accounts. 30% of your account would vanish. Now, the Greek government, this was carried by places like Financial Times, and the Greek bank officials are saying, no, we're not planning this at all. It's just another piece of propaganda to scare people into going along and doing what the bankers want. It's fear-mongering. That's how they're trying to sell this. Just like they're trying to sell global warming or vaccines. Fear is the weapon in Greece. Fear is the weapon against those uppity slaves who dare to think they could live without private central banks issuing all of the public currencies alone in interest. Now, Tsipras obviously is celebrating victory for his program, his agenda. And the first thing Tsipras did after it was obvious the referendum was a landslide rejection of the European money junkies, he called Vladimir Putin. And this is being reported as Putin was congratulating, we're concerned about the future, so forth and so on. I think it's very significant. I think there's more significance to this call than the corporate media is letting on. I think there's a very real possibility that Greece is going to tell the European Union to go jump in the Mediterranean, split off, and pivot toward Russia. This, of course, could lead to the U.S. government going into Athens and repeating the disaster in Kiev. Kick up problems, drive the elected government from office, put in a UN puppet, and trigger a civil war, which is what happened up in Ukraine. And their attitude is, we have to destroy this country to save it from Russia, just like we did Ukraine. We can't let it go to Russia. Better if we just bomb it all into rubble. We have to destroy them to save them. We actually used to hear that back in Vietnam, where they would level a Vietnamese village and said, well, we had to destroy it, or it would have been lost to the enemy. It used to be called a scorched earth policy, and apparently it is part of U.S. current military dogma here. Now, Greece's finance minister, Varoufakis, has resigned. He was very much controversial. The European Union said they couldn't negotiate with him. He was far too confrontational and argumentative. I'm not sure that's really what's going on here. But Euclid Tsakalotos is the new Greek finance minister. And everybody's hoping that he's going to be a little bit calmer. But again, the Troika cannot soften their approach to Greece without triggering demands from the other European Union nations for debt relief, interest relief, payment relief. And money junkies can never bring themselves to let go of a debt slave once they've got one. Now, the Greek conservative opposition chief, Antonis Samaras, has resigned. He was very much stay with the European Union, go along with austerity. Huge refutation of his policies, and he has now stepped down. All right, we're coming up here on a commercial break, and we're going to be back talking about just how we got into this mess. Is it Greece's fault, or is it the fault of the banking system? You know which way I'm going to go. We'll be right back. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And well, let's go ahead and take a couple of phone calls here. Andrew in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Andrew, are you there? I am not hearing Andrew. Are you there? All right.
You must have stepped away.
All right, I'm going to put Andrew back on hold, and we're going to go over to Ivan in Ohio. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Hey, I was just wondering if you saw my email I sent you. I sent you a new thing for my Phony Baloney song, but in the email I gave you some information about contacting a guy here in Ohio and maybe trying to do an interview with him.
I think I saw that. I haven't gotten around to following up on that yet.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering if you got it. Oh, and by the way, still no meat at the food bank. So
I'm sorry, repeat that last part?
We still haven't got any meat at the food bank because I was up there passed out, I think, what was it, last week? Yeah, last week, I do believe, because we go like every 2 weeks. And passed out and still no meat. So, I mean, all kinds of other stuff, but no meat. So.
All righty. Well, it's getting tight around here as well with the 2 food programs that Claire and I support, so I understand how that's going.
Well, all right, well, that's all I was wanting to know.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, getting on back to the situation in Greece, there's a very enlightening article over at hangthebankers.com. I love that name, by the way. How Greece was robbed by the bankers. And it points out all of the corporate media are out there trying to make it look like Greece are the bad guys. The government spent too much money. They managed it poorly. They went broke. The generous European money junkies gave them more money, but Greece can't pay the bills. Out of mismanagement, the Greek people are lazy. They just sit around drinking ouzo. And it's all a big fat lie. Not only about Greece, but all those other European countries, like Spain, Portugal, Italy, Ireland. They're all in trouble. France is now talking about leaving the European Union. Austria has signed enough petitions to force a debate in their parliament. Because the flaw of private central banking, its core instability, is that by design, it produces more debt than money with which to pay the debt. And that it grows and grows and grows until the system crashes. Greece did not fail on its own. It was made to fail by the private central bankers, and that's not even getting into that huge chunk of that debt that was created through outright fraud between Papandreou and Goldman Sachs. That's what's going on. Now, the government of Greece is still out there maintaining that they don't owe that 245 billion euros debt that was created through fraud. It is odious debt. And they shouldn't have to pay it. If somebody should pay it, it should be Papandreou and Goldman Sachs, who perpetrated the crime. I dare anybody to show me any law in any country, especially in the Constitution, that says the people are responsible for the financial losses of crimes committed by their government. It just isn't in there. But Christine Lagarde, who gets almost $1 million a year, tax-free, I might add, is out there saying, oh, debt is sacred, debt is holy, debt is sacrosanct. You will pay the debt. It doesn't matter where it came from. As long as we can write down a number on a piece of paper and say that's your debt, you will be enslaved to it. Because that's what private central banking is. It is a means to enslave nations to unpayable debt. What was it Rothschild said? Allow me to create and issue a nation's currency, and I care not who makes the laws. And we're seeing that. Well, now that the referendum has passed, and Greece is basically telling the EU to drop dead, questions about a Grexit are coming back, and more people are saying more than likely Greece is going to leave the European Union. They're going to create their own currency. They're more than likely going to pivot toward Russia, because Russia is out there making deals, the West is making war, and acting like money junkie tyrants. It's exactly what they're acting like. As I mentioned before, the Austrian people have signed enough petitions regarding leaving the European Union to force, under Austrian law, a debate in their parliament. The government is having to acknowledge the petitions in Austria. That's the law there. Here in the United States, we could have 300 million Americans sign a petition, and the government's attitude is, we don't care. Petitions aren't legally binding in this country. Over in Portugal, their anti-Euro movement has received a huge boost from the victory in the Greek referendum. Like I said, the contagion from Greece isn't just economic, it's political. Other nations are waking up and saying, yeah, this can be done. We can do this. we can stop being slaves to the private central bankers. Now, while we've been focusing on Greece, China has had a serious economic disruption. They've lost something like almost one-third of their stock market value over the last 3 months. And that's another way where globalism has come back to haunt them, because China is a manufacturing, exporting powerhouse, but their primary customer was the United States of America and Europe. And as the economy has gone downhill, Americans aren't going over to Walmart to buy cheap Chinese goods anymore. The Europeans aren't going to their equivalent to do the same. And as a result, the economic downturn in the U.S. and Europe has dragged China down with it. And China is having to take some very draconian steps to deal with that problem, including government backing of their derivatives. And apparently one of the things they've done, China has at least temporarily banned any new IPOs. They've got enough problems with the companies, corporations. They've got no more startups until they sort out this mess. Meanwhile, interesting article over in The Independent, they're now admitting London is the global money laundering center for the international drug trade. We are in a situation where banks are able to survive these hard economic times through fraud and crime. And there's nothing new there. I remember when the original Miami Vice was on TV, there was an amazing episode where Crockett and Tubbs were on the track of this major drug smuggler. And they got invited to talk to this banker saying, you can't arrest them because we have been loaning this country in South America money, and they're paying it back by selling cocaine to the American people. And if you interrupt that, we're going to have a financial crash. Down in Puerto Rico, they're now acknowledging their debt is unpayable. There's a whole bunch of credit default swaps out there with that as well. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to go ahead and grab a phone call real quick. Rob in Minnesota, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. About the Greek debt, ever since I watched have listened to John Perkins on Economic Hitman, there's a YouTube video up there where they took one of his interviews. It's only 2 minutes long, and it's set to a cartoon. And it just strikes me that this is going on at every level, right down to our local level. I mean, we've got projects that are, going on in our city where they're, financing redoing a park that they redid, a decade ago and did badly. It fell apart, and now the same clowns are back asking for more money. And it's, the park doesn't get used, and yet they put the debts off on the taxpayers. So this economic hitman, the way they do this, go in and, influence local the local mucky mucks, the guys that are running the show, that they're somehow important and should, incur big debts to put on the backs of the taxpayers. And
you're exactly right. You're exactly right. A lot of projects are undertaken for no other reason than to run up debts that the people are brainwashed into thinking they must honor, war being first and foremost among them.
Yeah, that's the biggie, and that's what they're trying to get us into. But yeah, that economic hitman 2-minute video, you watch that and just apply it at every level, from your local, state, federal, and then what's going on over in Europe with the Greek crisis. They just put those people in debt so they come in and collect on it and foreclose on it. And it's all fake money, like you've been saying all along. So
it's ink and paper and numbers in a computer. That's exactly right. And basically, they're bringing about a new feudalism where nobody, not an individual, not a city, not a county, not a state, not a nation, is allowed to do anything without the leave of their most noble high lordships, the bankers.
And the people that are running, this has got to be happening at every government level, too. The people that are supposedly in charge, they aren't all that smart, but because they've got a good paycheck coming in and they're being coached on what to do, they don't really understand what's going on.
No, they don't need to. They're there to sell it to the people and to do what they're told. That's what our politicians are for. They're salesmen. They're obedient lackeys. There is no real leadership in the civil government of the United States of America right now.
I believe you 100%. It's It's amazing when the clarity that comes after a while watching this stuff and saying, geez, this is really kind of simple, but they're doing it at every level. It's not.
That's right. Everything goes through the banks. Credit lines for inventory, credit lines for salaries. The money goes back to the bank when orders are fulfilled. It all goes through the bank, and the bank takes a piece of the action every step along the way. If you were to total up how much of the cost of a product on the shelf of a store is accumulated debt load by the manufacturer, distribution, and retailer, it would shock you. It's right up there with the amount of the price that is taken up with all the government taxes and fees.
I think it was a long time ago I called you and said it was, I think it was when Paulson got the $700 billion for the banker bailout, and I said, is this a banker bailout or a banker payoff? And because these guys, every time people refinance a loan, there's fees on top of it, and everybody's, credit card debt is fees on top of that, and it's all debt.
Well, when you refinance a debt, you're stretching the payments out more, and your total interest obligation goes up.
Not to mention the points to get that debt in the first place.
Yeah.
And, probably appraisals and all sorts of other fees on top of it. So, the banks should be just as flush as can be, and yet where is all that money going? They say that they're all broke, and I know the guys at the top are getting some mighty generous,
That's exactly
payoff.
right. They're huge salaries, huge stock options, bonuses. They're siphoning the money out of the top of the system as fast as they can because they know it's about ready to fall apart. And, when it does fall apart, the first step you got to do is say, all right, those old Federal Reserve dollars, they are now absolutely worthless. They're not redeemable for anything. You might as well use them for toilet paper. And all of the wealth that the money junkies accumulated through fraud and corruption will be basically gone. Because all they're going to have are numbers in a computer denominated in worthless dollars, stacks of ink and paper that is all of a sudden worthless. Governments have done that before. At the end of World War II, France issued a whole new banknote and declared all the existing banknotes utterly worthless. And you had to bring in the old banknotes and trade them for new banknotes, along with a really good explanation of how you got them. In order for the trade to go ahead. And those who got rich under the graft of the Nazis basically wound up just having huge bonfires and burning up those old notes because they couldn't explain how they got them. And we need
the old saying, paper is poverty. And that's what they're talking about. The banknotes is paper is poverty.
Well, I think they say, gold is the money of royalty. Banknotes are the money of the banks, and debt is the money of the poor people.
Yeah, it is. Thanks, Mike. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, here's an interesting story that came out of Freep.com. America is prosperous. Now, can we make people feel it? And I labeled this as a Bex alert, because that's what we're going to be saying. Don't worry, America's prosperous. America is rich. The problem is you don't realize how well off you are. That's going to be a tough sell to the 93 million Americans who have been unable to find a job. They can't actually fix the economy because the banking system on which our economy is based has a built-in crippling design flaw, that it creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt. So their solution is public relations. Really, America's prosperous. Look at the stock market. Look at the lifestyles of the rich and vapid. They're this wealthiest nation on earth. The problem is you don't believe that things are great in this country. I mean, they're basically telegraphing that they're going to try and solve this problem with propaganda. Really, you're very well off. Forget about the hunger and, how 1 in 30 Americans has lost their home to foreclosure so far. Forget all about that. You're really very well off. Honest, you can take our word for that, Along with humans are warming the planet, the economy is doing great, vaccines are safe and effective, and Obamacare really did lower health insurance costs. At some point, the American people need to stand up and say, we are sick and tired of all the lies. And we need to fire the liars, because the liars are going to go on lying. It gets them what they want, your money and your obedience and your children's lives for wars of conquest. So, anyway, now up in Chicago, because America is prosperous, and our problem is we have to make you all feel it, that you are well off, no matter how bad off you think you are. We've got to change your mind about that. Chicago is moving to impose a tax on Netflix and other online movies and music to help cover their growing deficit. Oh, it's more wealth coming in. We're going to tax all these online services. And we all know what's going to happen. People are going to stop downloading Netflix and music from Apple and iTunes, and more businesses will be driven into the edge of failure. Because the single biggest problem this country is facing right now is ordinary people do not have any money. And there are no jobs with which we can translate our labor into wages and salaries to put new money into the system. Each new grab for cash is doomed to fail because of that reality. So go ahead, Chicago. You can tax Netflix and iTunes and all the rest of it. All that's going to happen is people will stop using those services. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about the economy. Now, Gregory Monarino is out there basically saying that the Frankenstein debt monster has peaked. And he has a video out that we linked to the front of whatreallyhappened.com saying global confidence in this particular form of financing has been lost. Yeah, I think so. Pretty much everybody in the world has come to understand private central banking does not serve the community, the people, or the nation. It serves itself. It is a predatory enslavement machine ruled by compound interest. And it only works because you're brainwashed into believing this is the way the world is supposed to be. So we all need to become private central bank heretics. We don't believe this is the way the world is supposed to be. Just like we understand that slavery is not the way the world is supposed to be, or rule by divine right is not the way the world is supposed to be. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Let's see. Matthew in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Mike? I have to bring this up. This is just way out. I mean, there's a lot of things we should discuss today, but we will not discuss those because it's more important. I'm a United States veteran. I have a, Chapter 31, 33, whatever these, nonsense they made up to steal or, anyways. I found out yesterday, actually, that I was paid by the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
You're not getting this. I'm a government agent getting paid by a non-governmental agency. How does that work?
That works because the Federal Reserve is in control of the public currency. And when you send in a tax payment, it goes directly to the Federal Reserve, and the Federal Reserve does issue checks on behalf of the U.S. government. They may be stamped U.S. Treasury at the top, but if you check the banking number, all of it is a loan by the Federal Reserve to the U.S. government.
Interest.
Yeah, at interest.
We all get that, but what do we do? I got my Chapter 31. I got my rights. Take it how you want it, but I've put in my 2 cents. So what do we do?
We wait for it to fall apart. It's in the process of self-destructing.
You keep saying that, Mike.
Well, it is. And what we do is we stand up the way the people of Greece are doing right now. We stand up and say, we will not allow you to restart this scam ever again. No more private central banking. The public currency of every nation has to be handled as a public utility to serve commerce, to serve the people, to serve the nation, and not be turned into a privatized for-profit scam. Okay? Because
We're no longer just doing the Brexit. We're no longer, now you got the American United States Marine Corps, people like me, who are not going to put up with this. We're just not.
Okay, but I understand your anger. I understand your anger. Okay, but I'm not advocating any kind of a violent revolution because the U.S. government is obviously prepared to deal with that. What this government and banking system can't deal with is the growing global awareness of their true nature. And they're basically the political support for what they're doing is eroding out from underneath themselves, and they don't know what to do about it. I see the U.S. government collapsing the way the Soviet Union did, and it looks to be, and again, it's hard to prognosticate because we're trying to make predictions based on the rules, and they just change the rules whenever they feel like it. But I'm absolutely, I'm opposed to any
$20 a day in euro, and then you go to $20 a day. What's next? $10 a day? $5 a day? What are the Greeks going to do? You think they're going to sit there and just be like, oh, yeah, we're cool.
Hold it. A lot of the fear-mongering about what's going to happen to Greece now that they've voted to reject the austerity, a lot of that is being put out by the corporate media, which is trying to sell the idea that not being a slave to the bankers is somehow better than, or somehow much worse than being a slave to the bankers. That's the corporate media's task right now, is to convince you that freedom is somehow worse than slavery. And that's you're right into George Orwell with that.
Yes, sir. But 61% of people, and that's just what they manipulated, so it's probably 10 times fold more than that. But
I would agree with that.
The Greeks said, go pound sand. Like, they're not.
Good for the Greeks. Good for the Greeks. And I think what's going to happen is...
No, exactly. Everybody needs to be in this entire United States global world we live in. That's just my opinion.
No, I'm in agreement with you on that. We all have to be mentally ready to simply walk away from this system of enslavement that's been set up for us. We just need to concentrate on not giving the government an excuse to declare a national emergency and martial law. But I'll tell you, we're not out of the woods on Greece yet. They've got a major payment due on the 20th. They're not going to make that. Puerto Rico is going into default. Ukraine's going to be in default in another 2 weeks.
You got Puerto Rico. You got all these countries. So my question to you is, where are we going with this? I mean, we know we're going down the...
Yeah, we're going to have to go...
So
okay, Matthew, my turn. Okay, we're going to have to go through an economic crash, and we're going to have to spend about 3-4 months looking out for each other, for our friends and our neighbors and our community. And as the world starts to reform, we're going to have to stand up and say, okay, no more of this private central banking crap that led to this crash. We demand a public currency that is managed as a public utility. We demand that bankers that are proven to be criminals be thrown in jail like they did in Iceland, or executed like they did in Iran. You know, we shouldn't worship bankers as some kind of a holy class that is above the law, and yet in our culture we do.
We do. So here's my question: where's our future? I mean, I've stated it to you once again, so I'll restate the question. Like, how are we going to... I
understand what you're saying, and I'm answering it because if you look at the Soviet Union, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was about three... Matthew, are you going to let me talk? Never mind. Matthew, thank you very much for the phone call. If you look at how the Soviet Union collapsed, and they went through about 3 or 4 months of hardship, having to just get by, the new Russian republics were formed. Putin took charge of their central bank, and life in Russia is a lot better. And that's what I see happening in the United States of America. When this corrupted system comes crashing down, we have to be adamant that there are no new private central banks in this land, and then we're going to have a better life down the road. That's my honest opinion what's going to happen. And we should not ever give the government an excuse to say, oh, this Constitution and the Bill of Rights is suspended. We can't trust you people. You're all violent. We've got to take away your guns and your gold and everything. All right, we got a whole bunch of phone calls. I'm going to try and get them before the top of the hour news. Brian in Pennsylvania, what's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, I just sent you a whole bunch of links that I didn't know about, but apparently it's been going on for they've been trying to do it for a long time. It's a system called Origo, which is like Oregon and then go at the end of it. It's kind of but it's like all about paying by the mile, because it's like, I guess over there they have a lot of hybrid vehicles and stuff that gets really good gas mileage, so they're not getting their taxes at the pump the way people with crappy gas mileage do. So they want you to jam in a GPS device into your car and get paid at the pump and by the mile. I'm not sure if it's both that or just one or the other one, but
it'll be both. It'll be both, because Oregon is just as much in trouble with their bankers as any other state in the union. And here's something else to think about. You already pay a tax by the mile. It's the taxes on your tires that you put on the car. And, you know, if Oregon is going to throw a tax on hybrid and electric vehicles, it almost negates the whole idea of buying one in the first place. And the reason Oregon is imposing all these taxes and Chicago is taxing Netflix and everything is the debt in this country is out of control. And it's out of control because from day one of the Federal Reserve, the debt was unpayable by design. The instant that first pretty printed piece of paper went into circulation, more money was owed to the private central bank than was actually in existence, and it's impossible to reverse that situation. That's why we're in the mess right now. The people who set this whole scam up went to their graves happy after lifetimes of wealth and privilege and luxury, and it wasn't their problem to deal with, that it was going to collapse somewhere down the road because they're dead, they're happy, who cares? And we're the generation that's having to deal with that. All right, Brian, thank you very much for the phone call. I'm going to let you go, and we're going to try and jam Dustin in here real quick before the news break. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, can you hold me over through the news break?
All right, I'll hold you over through the news break here, and we're coming up here on the news break here. By the way, when we come on back, here's a weird one for you. Over in Odessa, in Ukraine, where Saakashvili is now in charge of the place, the U.S. government is paying the salaries of his staff. They can't even pay the firefighters and teachers in this country, but they're going to pay his staff. All right, we'll be right back with Dustin in New Jersey. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645, 877-300-7645. We're going to go back to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hey, Mike. That previous caller, he doesn't know what, he says, what should we do? One thing you could do is take your money out of the savings account. Why would you let the banks hold your money when you're getting 0.001% interest on it? That doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Yep. And you take your money out of savings, keep enough just for the checking to pay your bills, buy some gold and silver, stock some food, and hunker down and try to explain to people what's going on. If they don't want to listen, then just deal with it on your own and your family. That's what you do for a start. If you don't keep money in the banking system, they can't take your money.
Well, that's why they're trying to ban cash right now in order to prevent runs on the bank. You can't take your money out of the bank. It has to be in some bank somewhere. And that's one of the reasons why they're trying to build political support for banning cash, because only criminals use cash. But again, I don't think they're going to get a lot of traction with that, because there is a growing hostility and distrust of the banking system. And of course, politicians are going to need something to stuff in the G-string of all those strippers out there. There's a lot of commerce that requires cash, and we're talking commerce by the U.S. government. CIA operations, their little partnership with the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico, that whole funding venue for the CIA and these other intelligence agencies would collapse with a cashless society. So I don't think it's ever going to happen. What they may push for is an internal versus an external cash, where there's a U.S. dollar that's valid outside the country but not inside, and inside the U.S. it's all plastic. That may be what they're going for.
Remember, Jim Willey says that there would be two, one for international use and one for internal use of crony currency.
And the internal use one will be all plastic, so that you can't take your money out of the bank. And that means that is the ultimate dictatorship. When the money that you have worked for and earned, you're not allowed to actually have it in your hand. That is absolute tyranny and dictatorship. You will be at the mercy of their most ennobled high lordships of the bankers.
Not just that. You think about it. The NSA will know whatever transaction you do, whatever thing you buy, they'll know where you are at that time, and they'll have control over your money. So if you're like, one of those constitutionalists or something, they'll close your bank account digitally.
Yeah, guilty as charged, unfortunately. It's not the NSA's business to know. I stopped for a jelly donut on the way home from work. That's the Fourth Amendment right there. The government has no right to know I'm buying jelly donuts.
Hey, Mike, on the Greece thing, what's your opinion on Varoufakis leaving?
There's something going on there, and I think maybe he just got tired of the whole situation, or maybe Cyprus asked him to step down as a conciliatory approach to going back to negotiations with the Troika, because the Troika had made a big deal over the fact that they just couldn't deal with this guy. He has as hard a line as the European negotiators had, which meant nothing was going to happen. The Troika obviously wants somebody negotiating on behalf of Greece who is a little bit easier to bully and push around and get what they want. I don't know that they're going to get it with the replacement, but Tsipras probably just figured, all right, we'll get rid of this one guy, and that's my opening gambit to say we're still willing to talk. But the fact that Tsipras made his first phone call after victory in the referendum to Putin, I think tells me that it's a very serious possibility that Greece is just going to break off the EU and pivot to Russia, at which point, under whatever pretext, the U.S. will invade Greece and turn it into another Ukraine.
They need to leave. The West is not. When do people, in 2007, 2008, the system is dead. This is it. We're on life support. They need to head east. That's where the future is at. And I know people don't want to come to that conclusion, but that's the truth. And then,
well, the reason for the war agenda, against Russia and China is to create a political climate in which people no longer have the choice of pivoting to the east. Oh, you can't go do business with Russia and China. You can't use the ruble and yuan. They're the enemy. They're the bad guys. If you are loyal to the United States of America, you will go on using those Federal Reserve notes and charging the interest off to your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren.
Hey, how do you did you hear about the New Democracy? They want the leader to step down. That's a front group for the bankers.
Yeah, well, obviously the bankers are trying to put up their own opposition in any country that is talking about leaving the EU. They're going to be doing it in France any time now, because right now their leading candidate for the coming presidential elections is campaigning on a platform of leaving the EU. And so I'm expecting a well-financed challenger to appear in France to say, no, we don't need to leave the EU. Things are just wonderful the way they are. But again, the contagion from Greece is as much, if not more, political than economic. And it's sending the message around the world, yeah, you can start to break free from these predatory bankers. And I think more and more people around the world are coming to understand those private central banks are the common enemy of all mankind, because they are not set up to help the economy of the people or the country in which they operate. They are predatory institutions that are all about enslavement to debt. It is the essence of the banking industry to keep us all, whether we are nations or individuals, slaves to debt. That's a quote out of a very wonderful movie called The International, which, not too surprisingly, was pretty much ignored, if not panned, by the corporate media.
And when I flip through the channels, because I don't watch much TV because it's all propaganda, like you see, they were but before the vote, they're like, oh, there's going to be a yes vote because, the majority of people, and they were pushing that because, they're all in cahoots. They're all in collaboration to try to push an agenda that helps the bankers, the pharmaceutical companies. That's
exactly right. That's what the corporate media does. It serves the corporate interest. And all of this talk, all the polls on the ground, even the independence person on the ground said it was 80% in favor of rejecting austerity. And yet the corporate media's official stance, too close to call. They were telegraphing the fact that they were going to try and steal this election. And obviously the vote riggers came up short. And I would not be surprised to find out that it actually was 75 to 80% of the Greek people voted no, and they could only steal back, 10% of it.
And Mike, I just want to make sure you're ready and your listeners are ready, because, you got Greece, Puerto Rico, Detroit, and a whole bunch of other Americans. Pretty much the U.S. is broke. Everybody knows that. But the municipalities, the counties, they're all broke. So people need to just have their,
they got to be ready, because the derivatives firestorm is coming. I mean, Puerto Rico, there are credit default swaps on that. They're trying to dodge it by saying it's deferred payment. It's not a default. There's a payment moratorium, but Puerto Rico will eventually pay, therefore we don't have to pay on the credit default swaps. But the people holding those swaps are not going to sit still for that much longer, especially when Ukraine goes belly up or Greece misses their big payment here on the 20th of this month. Dustin, I got to let you go. Thank you very much. We're going to try and grab Mo in Florida here before the commercial break. Mo, what's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I just appreciate you taking my call. I wondered if you'd read, speaking of derivatives, that I think it was June 29th, on Zero Hedge, that mentions J.P. Morgan just cornered the commodity derivatives market. Did you read that?
I heard that they cornered the metals derivative market. And
yes,
I'm not sure why they would want that, because now we're hearing that the output of the world's gold mines has actually dropped by half over the last few years. And it's a mystery why gold prices are still down. Were we operating in a true market economy of supply and demand, gold prices should be going through the roof. So J.P. Morgan may be getting ready to pull a real fast one with those derivatives, and we do need to look at that more closely. Mo, thank you for the phone call. Got to let you go. Going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And as you heard on the SRN news break, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's lawyers have filed a motion for a new trial. And so we're starting into that all over again, and hopefully he's going to have a different lawyer, because don't forget, the lawyer he was given by the government started his trial by walking in and telling the jury he did it. I think actions like that would normally get an attorney disbarred, but if the attorney's goal is to make sure the patsy gets put away and executed, she was doing her job really, really well. And I just posted that story to the front page of WhatReallyHappened.com with a reminder of how easy it would be to get Dzhokhar Tsarnaev acquitted based on the photographic evidence from the scene. The bomb was wrapped in a black backpack with a little white square on it. The Tsarnaev brothers were both wearing gray or white backpacks, and there were these strange guys with black jackets and khaki pants. When they stood together, it was obvious it was a uniform, and their black backpacks had the same little white patch. There is your reasonable doubt right there. And the fact that Tsarnaev's lawyers never even brought it up to the jury tells you it was a kangaroo court, a show trial. This is the guy the government says is behind it, and that's all you need to know. Send him off and give him lethal injection. Twice, maybe 3 times. Just to make sure. All right, we're going to grab a phone call. John in Barbados, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? John, are you there? Okay, we seem to be having another problem.
Hello?
John, are you there?
Yep.
Okay.
You got me now.
I got you now. Okay, what's on your mind?
Okay, Greece.
Yes.
Seems that the Greek people voted more than 2/3 to extend the middle finger to the European Union and the Troika.
Yes.
So what happens now is in the lap of the Troika. It's up to them whether they come up with a deal or not.
Well, as I mentioned before on the show, I don't think the Troika can come up with a deal for the same reason they didn't come up with one before now. They cannot reduce Greece's debt. They cannot write off any of it. They can't reduce the interest or the payments or every other member unit of the European Union. Every other one of the member states is going to basically demand exactly the same thing.
Well, this is just one bit of a triple whammy, the Greek situation. If you look at the total debt, it's about nearly $500 billion. But Iran now, if there's a deal with Iran, America, through its seizure of export earnings and assets, owes Iran about $500 billion. A similar sum is owed to Iran by the EU. Can this EU American financial scam stand a $1.5 trillion grab?
Well, I'm going to speculate here that one of the conditions of the Iran deal we're not being told is that Iran will simply walk away from the currently seized assets in exchange for permission to just go back to doing business as usual. I'm sure Iran wants that money, but I'm sure they've been told point blank, you can't have it. And so I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to be a factor. The real danger to the American financial system, and it's more Puerto Rico than it is Greece or even Ukraine, are the derivatives, the credit default swaps. And we're already seeing the Wall Street financial industry, if you will, trying to get out of the derivatives by declaring this a payment moratorium and not really a default. but they're not going to be able to do that with too many of these derivatives without crashing the entire derivatives market itself.
Okay, my last and final point, Michael. I was reading about how the Pentagon had got this plan with all these bunker busters ready to go if the talks with Iran failed. And my question to the Pentagon is, just how are you going to deliver them to the target? In the massive radar-reflective B-52s or the B-2 Spirits that if you go too quickly, bits fall off it? The modern radars don't track the aeroplane anymore. They track the heat signature of the exhaust. You know, I mean, getting to those targets deep inside Iran for those 18 Spirits, or we've got a lot of B-52s, but of course they're just radar reflectors. They'll be easy targets. And both of those airplanes are limited to less than 50,000 feet.
Yeah, and I think the load-carrying capacity of the B-2 Spirit, they're only going to be able to carry one of those 30,000-pound bunker busters, and that's assuming it really is a 30,000-pound explosive bomb and not a tactical nuke with a 30,000-pound yield, which may be, you know, all this talk about the Moab and these hugely large conventional bombs may be a cover for the coming use of tactical nuclear warheads, in which case the B-2 can carry a whole bunch of those, because they don't really weigh 30,000 pounds.
Yeah, but I just wonder how they think they're going to be able to get to the target with these slow, low-altitude aeroplanes.
Well, they'll go in with a multi-phalanx approach. They'll send in jammers and ahead of time, and basically the way that they did Iraq. The only reason that F-117 got shot down over Kosovo is they sent it in all by itself, absolutely assured of its invisibility, and they didn't send it out with electronic jamming equipment to cover its presence there. I don't think they'll repeat the Kosovo mistake with Iran. In any event, you've got Netanyahu already out there saying that Israel's going to go ahead and bomb Iran's nuclear power station if the deal is signed. And so, you know, it really is getting crazy out there. Israel is getting ready to unleash a Chernobyl-Fukushima disaster all across the people of Iran because of whatever it is they think they're hearing from their imaginary playmate in the sky. There seem to be a lot of people in both governments who are hearing voices in their head from their antidepressant medication and confusing it with the will of the imaginary playmate.
Yeah, the problem I see, Michael, is that, you know, even with all this AWACS and ECM jamming, Iran has missiles that locks onto those signals and flies to them.
Yeah, they're probably getting a lot of them. Probably right now, Russia is already sending some of their electronic countermeasures to Iran, and as the USS Donald Cook up in the Black Sea learned, they are formidable.
Yeah, absolutely. So another middle finger extended to the U.S. by Iran.
Well, I just hope that we can keep this thing from going nuclear, because that's where it's headed. This country cannot win a conventional war against Russia and China, and they will use the nuclear weapons. That's just inevitable at this point. John, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, as I mentioned before we went to the news break at the top of the hour, over in Ukraine, the Odessa region has been making noises about joining with the eastern Ukrainian republics. So in order to tamp them down, Poroshenko appointed the former president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, who tried to gin up a war between Russia and Ossetia. He's now the new governor of the Odessa region, along with all of his cronies. And here is the insult to injury. The U.S. government is paying the salaries of Governor Saakashvili's team in Odessa, Ukraine. Our government can't even pay teachers or firefighters, but by golly, they've got the money to pay Saakashvili's people. And get this, the U.S. government says they're doing this in order to avoid corruption. I mean, it doesn't get more Orwell than that. Of course it's corruption. It's the U.S. corrupting the government of a foreign country. But according to the White House, our corruption is good. Their corruption is bad. You should oppose their corruption. You shouldn't notice our corruption. Our corruption is sweet-smelling, wrinkle-free. All righty, let's see. Let's grab another phone call. Andrew in New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
What's about you know how the U.S. has been attacking many countries, Iraq and like other Middle Eastern countries around the world? Well, while the U.S. was attacking these countries, the Russian and Chinese have been listening to the military, how the U.S. military conducts drills and everything, and they have developed technology that could blind these U.S. airplanes and everything.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I mean, when Russia and China set out to build a weapon, they set out to build a cost-effective, useful, effective weapon. And here in the United States of America, the purpose behind a weapons program is to suck money out of the American people and give it to these giant defense contractors who bloat up everything with junk because they make more money off of it under these cost-plus contracts. And there are generous kickbacks to the people inside the Pentagon who lobby for these programs to move forward, even though they're producing absolute junk. And that's why, even though the U.S. government has spent so much more money on weapons of war than Russia and China, that's not a guarantee of eventual victory. In fact, we're already seeing the Air Force is coming out trying to defend itself from the huge embarrassment that the F-35 lost a dogfight with a 1970s vintage F-16. Now, the F-35 was sold as the replacement for the F-16, and it can't beat the plane that it's supposed to replace. And, of course, the Air Force is out there saying, well, the fact that it lost the dogfight doesn't tell the whole story. I mean, look how cool it looks. It's got swept wings, and it's this, and it's that. And they don't want to talk about the fact it's not as stealthy as they thought it was going to be. Can't fly in the rain, can't fly in fog, can't fly near lightning. The software for the cannon is still 2 years away. The helmet control display system, $400,000 per helmet because they have to be custom built for every pilot. That doesn't work. The system to integrate tracking information among a squadron is presenting false targets. The system that is supposed to allow the pilot to look around literally through his own airplane, they can't get the images from the cameras to match up. It is an absolute disaster. It's the most expensive warplane in history. It is a piece of junk. And every test pilot who's flown it has said this thing is going to get its rear end handed to it by any foreign fighters it comes up against.
What do you make of, I was reading this article how, the U.S. is trying to do the same thing as they did in Ukraine, overthrow a government, and they're trying to do that in Greece.
Well, they're probably going to try and do that in Greece now that the referendum has gone against their interests. It looks like they're getting ready to do that also in another country where there's a big kerfuffle kicking up as well. Because this is how the U.S. conquers the world. Go on in, pretend that they represent some kind of a popular uprising, overthrow the elected government, put in a puppet. And when the people rise up and kick out the puppet, like they did in Egypt with Mubarak, well, go on in and overthrow the Egyptian leader Morsi and put in a new puppet, El-Sisi. There's even talk that because of Poroshenko's complete failure in Kiev, that the U.S. may kick him out and put a replacement in.
They're saying that Putin now is after the Baltic states. That's what a lot of the media's been saying lately.
No, it's the U.S. that's after the Baltic states. Yeah, the U.S. is always after somebody else's state. I mean, it is very obvious who the aggressor is in this run-up to a new world war. And it's not Russia and it's not China.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to DJ in Georgia. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, thanks for taking my call. Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about real quick the Jade Helm 15 reprise that I mentioned last week. I just wanted to bring up two more points to that that makes me believe that it's not just a military drill. I believe they're contingency planning for certain states that will probably leave the whole U.S. dollar post-financial meltdown system. I don't know if you've brought this up yet already, but I think in October, the IMF is going to announce an official dollar alternative, which will probably be the SDR, but I doubt it's going to be the yuan, but even though I think the yuan is going to be in the basket of currencies, I think they're going to take the dollar off as the main one. And I think states that are already kind of pre-planning this shift which won't affect the U.S. as much as a lot of people
think. All right, let me come in here a little bit here because we're almost out of time in this segment. Obviously, the fact that the IMF, which is located in the United States of America, is getting ready to abandon the U.S. dollar as the principal global trade and banking currency is very significant. That being said, I don't think Jade Helm has to do with events that are going to happen over in October. We know the end of this month, Greece is going to miss another really huge payment to the bankers, and that is going to start the derivatives firestorm because those people aren't going to go along with saying, this isn't moratorium on payment. Greece is breaking off and stiffing us for the debt. You've got to make good on those credit default swaps. Now, regardless of what Jade Helm's current overt purpose is for, there is no question that in the event of a crisis triggered by the Greece meltdown, the European meltdown, they could be instantly repurposed on the streets of America. The reason I don't think it's planned for that is the Jade Helm troops are not positioned around what would be seen as the major financial centers where you're going to have people rioting and breaking into the banks like Los Angeles and New York.
Well, I think, real quick, if you let me, I think, New York and California are going to be signed on to whatever the alternative will be, which will happen fairly quickly, and if they do announce it. So I think that, all the states are already on board. The ones that aren't, I think Texas might go their own way because they have their own gold. Utah has the Mormons, and they've got, obviously, their own ways and means.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, that could very well be. That could very well be.
And if you look at Ukraine, it's only about the size of Texas. I doubt that the training exercise...
I have a real quick question. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're almost at the commercial break. I have a real quick question. If all of these southern states have rejected this deal to change currencies, why haven't they gone public on it? Because that's the missing piece. That's the part that should be there and isn't. And it's an interesting theory. I'm not sure I'm ready to commit and say that's what's going on. So thank you very much for the phone call, DJ. I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. And when we come on back, another phone call waiting. And the U.S. bombs Baghdad by accident, but a bomb is a bomb is a bomb is a bomb. We'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. And following along with the concerns about Jade Helm, according to the Washington Post, people who are worried about Jade Helm possibly being something more than a training exercise, they're just being racists because they hate the fact that we have a black president. They're out there trying to smear constitutionalists who are very concerned over the fact that our government is no longer complying with the Constitution, and they're out there saying, well, you're just being racist because we have a black president. That's the Washington Post, the official newspaper of record of the Central Intelligence Agency. All right, we're going to grab a phone call here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. What's on your mind today?
Hey, Mike. I had a couple of questions for you. One is, what stopped, I predicted yesterday there'd be probably about a 500-point drop in the stock market today, and it might even be worse. The panic really started setting in, and it was only like 50 points or something. And the other question I got to you is, when is Putin going to finally say enough is enough and kick the Ukrainian army out of the entire eastern part of Ukraine?
He's not going to do that. He's not going to do that. He knows that's what the U.S. wants.
Well, they want, but he's got to protect the people. I mean, what is the U.S. going to do? They're not going to go. We're not going to go to war with him. He'd kick our butts in about 2 days. With the kind of army we got today. You kidding me?
The U.S. would go to the nuclear weapons if they wanted. The whole goal of this is to build a new iron curtain around Russia and China to prevent Russia and China's growing economies from further displacing the U.S. dollar. That's what this is really all about. Putin understands the U.S. is trying to get into a state of conflict. He's not going to give them the excuse. If war is coming, and war does seem to be coming, it's in Putin's advantage to let the world see the United States as the aggressor, because
do you really think these people are mad enough that they would actually go to war with Russia and possibly end the world as we know it? I mean, You know what Einstein said about
absolutely, because they've got their bunkers. They've got their prepper bunkers. They've got the Greenbrier. They've got Mount Weather. They've reactivated Cheyenne Mountain. Yeah, they're digging down and getting ready to go, because if they lose control of it and the entire world is decimated, they'll come out in 50 years and there's going to be, hardly any people, and it's going to be green and beautiful and natural, and they're going to have the planet all to themselves. They think. Okay, my plan is when things go really bad and all these people go down into their bunkers, we should find the hatches to those bunkers and just cement them over. Forget about trying to break in. They got guns and everything. Let's just cement it all over and leave them down there.
I'd like to stop them before they even get in. Like to start.
Well, I would too. But
if there's anybody alive to even do anything, I mean, these people are absolutely nuts. We didn't have this during the Cold War. I didn't see the vociferous attacks in Russia that I see now during the Cold War, and it's crazy. These neocons are totally out of control.
Well, they want a new Cold War. That's what they want. They're hoping to get back to a new Cold War. The problem is Cold Wars are always hovering at the edge of going hot, based on whichever world leader is the least mentally stable. And frankly, most of the people in Washington, D.C., I don't know if it's from the prescription antidepressants or the lead pipes in some of those older buildings, but a lot of them are basically certifiable. And there are those who actually think, let's go ahead and have a nuclear war. It's going to clean out all the useless eaters. The world is overpopulated anyway. We don't have enough food to feed everybody. Let's just launch the nuclear weapons and biological weapons and just, knock off 6.5 billion human beings. There'll only be 500 million left, conforming with the Georgia Guidestones, and the world will be in balance again.
But how's the world going to be in balance when everything is going to basically die? All life forms and everything else pretty much.
Well, let me back off here a little bit. I mean, I absolutely love the movie On the Beach. It was a very necessary warning. But remember, we're still dealing with the radioactivity from all those nuclear bomb tests in the Pacific, and we're still here. We're still here after Fukushima. Yes, we're getting cancer and a bunch of other problems as well. But the human race historically has been very resilient. Following the eruption of the Toba supervolcano, I think it was 60,000 years ago, mitochondrial DNA shows that the human population actually shrank to less than 8,000 individuals following that, and we still came back. I don't think World War III is going to eradicate all the humans on planet Earth. We'll just pick up and move forward, and hopefully we'll have the wisdom to not let governments and bankers go so crazy again in the future.
But you're talking about thousands of bombs going off now. We're not talking about even hundreds. I mean, both countries have, between the United States and Russia, I don't know how many thousands of bombs, and probably Israel and Iran, and who knows who else would get it, India, Pakistan, they all start shooting them off. I mean, once really starts. I'm not trying
to trivialize the problem, and believe me, a nuclear war is something I hope to avoid. But there's a factor that you need to take in there. In the first exchange of a nuclear war, the targets are going to be the other guy's nuclear weapons. Meaning, despite all the thousands of weapons everybody has, the number that will actually be in use and hit their targets is going to be relatively small. Most will be destroyed in their silos and submarines.
Okay. And how about as far as what I was asking about with Greece? With the stock market day. What do you think prevented it from really crashing?
In Europe and the U.S., the private central bankers just got their little computers out and typed a couple of billion euros and a couple of $1 billion into the investment firms to buy up stocks as quickly as they were being sold to keep the market up. We know it's being rigged. We know gold prices are being artificially kept down because of that report that came out that said the actual production of the world's gold mine has fallen by half. Now, in supply and demand, gold prices should be going up. They're being held down artificially. The markets are being tinkered with and manipulated to try and reassure us all that everything is all hunky-dory and that we should not be angry with the government and the bankers for having created this debt-based slave system that has made them rich and us poor.
And one other thing, did you see what Fatso there in New Jersey said about Rand Paul yesterday. I mean, it's disgusting. I almost wanted to break through the TV.
Let's not get personal on there, but yes, I did post that to the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, where Governor Chris Christie is out there saying that Rand Paul ought to be blamed for the next terror attack in the United States of America. And frankly, that kind of grandstanding I don't think is going to help Christie's campaign. It makes him look like a blowhard. It makes him look borderline irrational. Because, Rand Paul made some valid points. And let's be honest, all the terror attacks that are happening are the product of various governments going through these manufactured front groups, whether it's the toilet group over here, Al-Qaeda, or ISIS, which we all know is just manufactured by the U.S. and being supported by them. So for Chris Christie to leap on that and say terror is coming, especially after we went through this 4th of July weekend where the entire U.S. government intelligence apparatus and FBI were saying wolf, 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 and the wolf didn't show up. So today Chris Christie's bloviating is looking a little bit silly in hindsight, I think.
Yeah, I was actually looking around in the woods here. I live in the middle of the woods up in the mountains here. And I was looking around for terrorists under trees and all. Then I went into my underwear and I saw see if there's any terrorists in my underwear. And the TSA always seems to check your underwear when you go on a plane. So I looked there and I couldn't find any. So I don't know. There didn't seem to be any.
No, they're all phonies and fakes, like Adam Gadon, whose real name was Adam Perlman, and it's all theater. It's all a theater production. And I don't think they're able to deal with the fact that the people of the world are now awake and realize that government is organized crime, and it does lie, and it does put on theater pageants to scare us into obedience to whatever their greedy agenda happens to be. And it really is all starting to come apart. I hope we're not looking at the cusp of a new Dark Ages, which is what happened when Rome finally collapsed. But it's obvious we can't go on the way we've been going on. It can't last forever. It was never going to last forever. When all of these private central bank nations have a built-in self-destruct mechanism, which is the debt gets too big to support and everything comes apart. And because of economic globalism, it's all coming apart at the exact same time. And really, the people of planet Earth need to be ready to stand up and say, no more private central banks. The only legitimate public currency has to be handled as a public utility. Okay, we got to take a break for news. Mark, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. We'll be back after the news break. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show today. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open. 877-300-7645. 877-300-7645. And before we get back to the news, I want to ask you a question. Why would people in the United States be interested in the temperature in Bavaria, Germany? So why is SRN out there reporting on all these high temperatures in Europe? Because they're pushing the global warming agenda. And remember, all of these claims that they have made to date, 2015, the hottest year on record, turned out to be a lie. Record temperature in London turned out to be a lie. These will turn out to be a lie as well. They're still pushing human-caused global warming. They actually think you are all such morons that you're going to forget all about the record cold and ice we have seen for the last several years and believe them when they say, oh, the world is warming. It's warming. It's all your fault. You got to pay a carbon tax. You got to do what we tell you to do. By the way, over on Mount St. Helens, the volcano in Washington State, which is still steaming, it is now the home of the world's youngest glacier. The carbon Nazis have been screaming about all the glaciers are disappearing. Well, we're seeing new glaciers form, including inside an active volcano, coming out of this very cold record winter. And there's another one on the way. Can already see the signs. But the media still thinks that you are all such trusting, naive children that when they say, oh, we got a record temperature. And did you notice how cagey they were about it? Storms came through and the temperatures went back down immediately. They don't want you going out and checking for yourself what the thermometers were really saying. And don't forget, they love to go to those weather stations at the airports to get high temperatures because those thermometers are surrounded by aircraft belching out burning avgas and kerosene. And they get record high numbers there to cherry pick their data. They really think you are that stupid, naive, trusting that you're going to buy this stuff. Really, the world is warming. It's all your fault. Vaccines are safe and effective. Russia's bad. China's bad. We're good. And so forth and so on. How many times do you have to be lied to? Right in your face. It's almost like they're lying in your face and daring you to stand up and say, I don't believe you. Because then they can slap you around. You're obviously an American. Real Americans believe the bovine excrement. If you don't believe our bovine excrement, the terrorists will win. Anyway, as I mentioned in the last hour, the U.S. is bombing Baghdad again, apparently this time by accident. And actually, it was an Iraqi warplane, was heading back to Baghdad with a live one still on the rail, fell off the rail, blew up 3 houses in Baghdad, Jadida. Yeah, whoopsie, that's not going to be a friendly village anymore. Now, over in Yemen, the bombing is intentional. More Saudi airstrikes have killed another 45 civilians, non-combatants in northern Yemen. Because what's going on in Yemen is not a fight against rebels. It is collective punishment of the people of an entire nation for wanting to kick out their U.S. puppet ruler. Every one of these conflicts you are seeing is all about the U.S. wanting to impose puppet dictatorships and the people of these countries standing up and saying, no, we're not going to do that anymore. Now, the U.S. and Saudi man-made famine is now threatening 20 million Yemenis. It's a starvation blockade. It is collective punishment, and I would like to remind you all, collective punishment is a war crime. Now, Russia is vowing continued support for the Syrian government, and they've been very cagey about this. The U.S. is on the ground in Syria. Happened over the weekend. U.S. troops are inside Syria conducting attacks, we're told, against ISIS. But apparently ISIS is always standing right next to some critical part of the Syrian infrastructure. And the U.S. is still going on saying, we're not making war against the Syrian people or the Syrian government. We have to just go where ISIS is. And Russia came in and said, by golly, you're right. We've got to support Assad against ISIS. And so that's ratcheting up over there. Now, last word we're getting from the P5+1 is that there has been some kind of a breakthrough in the negotiations. They're getting really, really close to a deal despite all of the outside interference that's coming in. And they're getting really close on it. As I mentioned to that caller, I think the outstanding debts to Iran may be written off. The sticking points continue to be when the sanctions are going to be lifted and inspection of non-nuclear military sites, which were never part of the P5+1. That's been thrown on there in an attempt to derail the situation. And it gets even worse than that. Apparently, there are 2 senators getting ready to introduce a bill into the Congress that will extend the Iran sanctions 10 years, no questions asked. And apparently they think they've got a veto-proof majority. And of course, if the U.S. Congress passes a bill to extend those Iran sanctions, then obviously the P5+1 talks have failed. And Israel and the U.S. are free to invade. Bunch of sellouts. Story over here in the Times of Israel. Israel gears up to battle Iran deal in the U.S. Congress. They're openly admitting Israel is over in the U.S. Congress saying, if you expect a big fat campaign donation check for next year, you will go out and find some way to kill this deal with Iran. Because the goal here is not a nuclear-free Mideast, or they'd be looking at Israel's nuclear weapons. The goal is to smash Iran as a regional economic threat to Israel, force them back onto private central banking, make sure Iran's oil is only sold for the U.S. dollar, and ultimately to balkanize it, break it into smaller pieces, like they're already talking about doing with Iraq. And everybody sees that's what's going on. And it may, in fact, be reshaping next year's elections already, because there's an interesting article over in Mondo Weiss that says polls among America's Democrats are turning against Israel. It's being seen as a racist country exerting way too much influence over the U.S. government. And this is from a pro-Israel pollster, Frank Luntz, who came up, and regardless of how he asked the questions, 3/4 of American Democrats see Israel as racist and having too much influence over our country. Criticism of Israel is gaining traction in the Democratic base. And the Hillary Rodham Clinton campaign is panicking because her campaign is all about pleasing almighty Israel. In fact, Clinton came out with this comment last week, was quoted in Haaretz. Clinton is alarmed over all these calls for an Israel boycott and says it's time for bipartisan action. We have got to move to stop this boycott of Israel. Now, boycotts are a recognized form of nonviolent protest protected as free speech under the First Amendment. Hillary, once again, is proving she is a whore for Israel, willing to subvert Americans' freedoms to please her masters in Tel Aviv. And she's got a lot of support from Jewish billionaires. George Soros, Chaim Saban are out there donating so far $3 million to her campaign, trying to get her in there. And Hillary is already showing her gratitude by saying that if she's president, the U.S. will attack Iran. There's no question. We will attack Iran. Doesn't matter if they didn't do anything. As president, I will be a war president. We will attack Iran. Good reason to not vote for this lady. She may not even get to the running. More about that when we get back. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show. And checking my email box, I get the usual letters from the Carbonazzi saying, no, you're in denial, the world is warming. And I also got quite a few emails from our listeners who are in Europe, and they're all saying the same thing. It's not unusually hot here. It's about normal for what, this time of year. And they don't know where they're getting all these really high temperatures, but in fact, somebody just sent me the temperature from Bavaria. And it's only 80 there. I mean, it's 88 here on Oahu. They're just making it up again. They still think over in the corporate media and the bowels of power in Washington, D.C. and Wall Street that you are a bunch of gullible boobs who will believe what you are told to believe. I guess they have to desperately cling to that belief because the alternative is something they can't deal with. A population that can't be controlled, that can't be tricked, that can't be deceived. Our financial and political system has gotten by with lies, fraud, and deception for so long, they don't know any other way to operate. The Wall Street financial people have openly admitted it in magazine interviews. Without fraud, they can't stay in business. We've had politicians come out and say as much as, if we can't successfully lie to the people, we can't govern. Okay, let's get rid of these. Do the old cash for clunker deal. Take our old, bloated, inefficient, deceptive, dishonest, corrupt government, bail it up, get a check to buy a new, smaller, more efficient, more honest government that actually knows how to run a nation. Find some bankers that know how to actually run the financial system without having to resort to fraud to do so. Now, getting on back to Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is still refusing to release her personal medical records. There's a question about an injury she sustained to her head some time ago that may have resulted in a permanent impairment. And she is out there saying she doesn't have to release her medical records. It's none of your business. This in a nation where Obamacare keeps all of your medical records forever. If you had a youthful indiscretion where you got a sexually transmitted disease, that's now government knowledge for the rest of your life. I don't know what possible use it's going to be, but they're going to keep it. But for the politicians, oh, no, our medical records are private. You don't need to know if the person that is running for office is actually psychotic or sociopathic. Now, the good news is, and this bodes ill for me, I've been working on this project called The Epic of Clinton's Mess, which I'm going to get to as soon as I get the new website up and running, which is proving to be difficult. But I may actually be a little late to the gate because there's an interesting story over at the Washington Examiner. The media is starting to look at alternatives to Hillary because of the email controversy and all of the other baggage that is starting to swirl around her. Hillary is carrying more baggage than Kim Kardashian on a photo shoot. And the media is starting to say, we probably ought not to presume she's going to be the Democratic candidate next year because there are Democrats stepping into the ring. We're hearing that Joe Biden is under a lot of pressure from the Democratic leadership to step in and save them in the event of a Hillary collapse. They might even go ahead and impeach Barack Obama to make Biden the president, so he goes into the convention next year from the position of being the incumbency. That would make him unbeatable, no matter how much vote fraud Hillary engages in. So Hillary's divine right to the Oval Office is very much in doubt. Now, I want to get on back to some of the stuff in the emails. Everyone's talking about Sidney Blumenthal and how he's actually anti-Israel, and they're making a big stink about that. That's not the issue in these emails. The issue that is in the emails that have been released or leaked is the fact that, yes, indeed, Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, was overseeing the transfer of weapons from Libya following the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi to America's hired mercenaries inside Syria, which are publicly declared to be Al-Qaeda and ISIS. They're on the list of known terrorists. And Hillary Clinton was arming them to go against Assad. There's a small problem there. Under the USA Patriot Act, providing weapons to recognized terrorist groups is a felony. And people who commit felonies are not allowed to run for the presidency of the United States of America. And so that is starting to come out. Because nobody in this country is above the letter of the law. And if Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama took it upon themselves to skirt around the law by arming Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, they have broken the law. And while we understand under the current Just Us system, they're not likely to be prosecuted, but the public needs to be aware. These people are criminals who armed terrorists. Remember that embarrassment where they had a terror suspect they had on show trial in Great Britain? And he got off because he pointed out, hey, he was providing support to the same people the British intelligence services were. And they had to let him go. Now, you've probably heard by now, it even made the corporate news, Hillary Clinton, in one of her recent campaign stops, literally roped off the reporters from being able to get close to Hillary. She doesn't want to talk to them. She doesn't want to deal with their questions. The only reporters allowed to be with her are the ones that have been pre-vetted to only ask the questions Hillary wants asked so she can deliver the pre-rehearsed answers. And at this 4th of July parade in Gorham, New Hampshire, that she literally, her campaign workers set up a rope to keep the uncooperative media away from her. And we're talking about people from the major TV news networks. That did not go over very well with them. Somebody got a picture of it, of these reporters from the major networks being roped away from the candidate. And that's gone viral all over the net, as well as it should. Now, Hillary is out there basically trying to take the attitude that all this stuff about the email server, it's nonsense, it's a tempest in a teapot, you shouldn't look at it. But she's launching her vitriol against China. Pardon me. And apparently when she was at this Independence Day campaign rally, Clinton accused the Chinese of stealing corporate secrets and pilfering U.S. government information, which is silly. That's the NSA that's doing that. And apparently the audience actually laughed at her when she made the comment. Now, Chinese government officials are saying, no, we're not doing it, but we know where Hillary's going with this. She's going to claim the Chinese hacked her server and planted all of this bad information to make her look bad. See, Hillary Clinton's just an angel. All of this bad evidence, it's the Chinese hackers. That's what they're doing. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And as long as we're on the subject here of computers, I want to share some things. I am still working to get the new version of the What Really Happened website up and running. I'm continuing to find problems. The way website authoring is currently set up between the responsive format, which is fraught with problems. I'm finding all these articles all over the web about why responsive theming has been a disaster. But, you know, look how many components. You've got PHP, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, AJAX, SQL. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, 6 completely different incompatible systems to try and put together a website. And the way dynamic websites are set up, and this is a tremendous shortfall, there's no way that you can point to something on the end web page and know where it came from. The way the code is said, there is no backtracing debuggers whatsoever. It's set up for large corporate departments with 10 or 20 people to build a website from the bottom to the top, but it's completely inappropriate for somebody who's trying to go back in and fix things. And every time I change one thing, it breaks something else, and it's been a real nightmare. And it's one of the reasons I enjoy this little Commodore VIC-20 I found at a yard sale a couple of weeks ago, and it still works. 35 years old, this Commodore VIC-20 still works. You type in what you want, it gives you what you want immediately. Instant gratification. I really love that. Now then, as another indicator of this culture of, well, it's broken, just deal with it and accept it. If you are like me, and regardless of whatever web browser you're using, you're going to keep seeing these messages, the Shockwave player has crashed. And there'll be a little button that says send in a crash report, which I dutifully hit. And this has been going on forever. Can't they fix this? Are they not even trying? Is the new model that, yes, it's not working, but you should just be used to it? Because if you point out the flaws, then you're being un-American. You're being un-business. It's politically incorrect to point out where America's IT product is less than perfect. Now, we don't allow Shockwave at whatreallyhappened.com. Our advertisers, unfortunately, sometimes do. We had a bad experience with Shockwave early on with an advertising client who did bad things. So Shockwave is banned at our websites, all of our websites. It is a major security problem. We're always hearing, oh, another. Why are people still using this? I mean, it's insane to program. I used Shockwave Flash to create the computer displays when I was working on Lost, and it's very inelegant. I don't know why people are still using it, especially in the days of high bandwidth. You don't really need it. But it's still out there, and it's a major security problem. Now, if you get a phone call, because I just got one during the first hour, if you get a phone call from somebody who says, your business web page does not conform to Google's standards, and we will bring it up to date for a fee, that is a scam. These people are not affiliated with Google. They're just out there violating the do not call list. It is another scam. The scammers are running rampant all over our country. Government can't be bothered dealing with them. They have to go after ISIS. And by the way, I've been talking about how America's bloated military is a waste of money and doesn't really work. And it's not just America's military. It's all of our products in general. And I want to give you a really good example. We've all heard about the Apple Watch. The sales have not been stellar, and they're declining very rapidly. And, I mean, the Apple Watch does all kinds of things. It does games, and it's got a heart monitor and all this other stuff in there. But marketing research has shown the overwhelming majority of Apple Watch users only use it for one thing, to get the notifications from their iPhone that there's a mail, a text message, something like that. That's all they're using it for. So, for those of you on BAM User TV, I just got this for my wife, and it is a smartwatch that does just those functions. Okay? Lets you know when you've got mail, a message. Yes, it's an extension to the phone. You can hold it to your ear and talk on it. $20. Because it isn't loaded up with all kinds of features that nobody's ever really going to use. And that's another reason why American products can't compete anymore. Alrighty, now then, story out of crack2.com. They have a cartoon showing exactly how Republicans should treat Donald Trump, and everybody's pounding on him. Oh, he's racist. How dare he say that illegal immigrants are criminals and stuff. Well, you know, the people who aren't criminals, the people who aren't, who are making a living and doing well in Mexico, they stay there. The people coming across the border are those who couldn't make it in their own country or who are fleeing prosecution, and that is a reality. Donald Trump raised a legitimate concern. The media is completely spinning what he said to say that all the illegal immigrants are rapists and murderers. No, they aren't. Just some of them, like the guy who just shot that lady up in San Francisco, who'd been deported 5 times and let back in. Now, this attack on Donald Trump is not about Donald Trump, and I'm not a Trump supporter. I think he's a joke. I think he wants to say, I ran for president, for his ego and his vanity. I don't think he really wants the job. But the attack on Trump is because he's raised an issue that neither party want to talk about next election year, the illegal immigration problem. That's verboten. You will not talk. We'll talk about gay marriage. We'll talk about abortion. We'll talk about race relations. But we're not going to talk about the illegal immigration situation. Not going to talk about Obamacare. Not going to talk about, Israel's dominance over government. Not going to talk about all the wars. Not going to talk about the real state of the economy. There's the permitted list of election year issues, and there's the unpermitted list. And Donald Trump committed the unpardonable sin of actually raising up an issue that influences a great deal of our lives. You have these illegal immigrants coming to this country. They're out there in California drinking the water, taking the jobs. They're bringing in contagious infectious diseases. And yes, a portion of them are, in fact, criminals fleeing prosecution in their own country. And nobody wants to talk about that because whatever is behind this open borders policy, and it seems to be the North American Union, that's off limits. We'll distract the voters with gay marriage and all the rest of this other stuff. Alrighty, moving on down here. Now, down in Cuba, as you know, they're normalizing relations. They've reopened the embassies, which I think is a good thing because carrying a grudge against Cuba for 60 years is really rather silly and pointless. It just makes the U.S. look like, he's throwing a tantrum, being a bully. And the normalization of relations with Cuba isn't really there to help the Cuban people. It's there to keep Cuba out of Russia's sphere of influence for the coming war. And yet we still have a whole bunch of people out there screaming, we can't be friends with Cuba. They rejected our U.S. puppet ruler Batista, and they had their own leader, Castro. We can't tolerate that. Now, Cuba, whatever their other shortfalls, they have a health system second to none in the world. Cuba has just developed a means to prevent mother-to-child HIV transmission. You think about that. If the mother has HIV in this country, the baby will have it. Cuba has figured out a way to block that. Is that not something that should be allowed to come into this country? Along with Cuban rum and Cuban cigars. Now, the GMO lobbyists are out there trying to sell their product, even with the growing awareness that there are some serious problems with these glyphosate-based herbicides and the GMO crops, which used to be able, were able to resist glyphosate and then transferred that immunity to the weeds. More about GMO when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today. We're talking about GMO and the ongoing controversy about you will love your GMO or you're not a real American. And as you know, the GMO industry got its knickers in a real bind a couple of weeks ago when the World Health Organization came out and said that, glyphosate is a probable cancer-causing chemical. And even then, the World Health Organization was trying to tread lightly by not saying it flat out is. Well, apparently, back in 1985, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency came to the same conclusion. They have known for 30 years glyphosate was carcinogenic. But we can't tell the public. We've got to think about the profits of those genetic modified companies. We've got to think about the profitability of the cancer treatment industry, because really, if you're not all chronically ill and sick and requiring constant treatment, the whole economy would collapse. And obviously, the economy is much more important than the individual health of a few people. I mean, come on. Got to have priorities. You know, governing is choosing, governing is prioritizing, and the money always has to be a higher priority than people's health and safety and happiness here. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has reclassified Agent Orange as carcinogenic. This is the herbicide 2,4-dichlorophenoxacet acid as a carcinogen. Now, you remember all those veterans from Vietnam who got dosed with this stuff and came down ill, and the Veterans Administration and the Pentagon said, you're just imagining it, there's no connection whatsoever. Well, I guess there are so few of the Vietnam victims of Agent Orange still left alive, they figure they can afford a few settlements, and they've gone out and said, yeah, it actually is. We know Agent Orange is dangerous. So it was actually tested and developed here at the University of Hawaii. And it was tested down on the Big Island, and you can't go in there still to this very day. It's chained off, and you don't want to go in there because you will die horribly. And there was an accident where a couple of students got killed. Now, Newsweek is finally admitting what we have been telling you for years. Fluoride in the drinking water does not prevent tooth decay. It does cause retardation in children who drink it. Basically, they have drawn a correlation. There was a Harvard study showed the fact that children who live in areas with high sodium fluoride content have significantly lower IQs than children in areas that don't. It's right out of Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. The workers have to have their brains damaged to make them useful. That's exactly what's going on. Alrighty, quick little note here. Apparently the Obama administration, I'm going back to immigration. As you know, there was a horrible tragedy up in San Francisco where this woman was shot by an illegal alien who'd been deported 5 times and came right back into the country. And the White House is saying this has nothing to do with Obama's open borders immigration policy. It's all the fault of the Republicans who didn't fund border security the way I wanted. That's really getting out there. When the lies and the bovine excrement get piled up this high, you know we're getting close to the end of this regime, as it were. Now then, as you know, the vaccine promoters are out there screaming that vaccines are good, vaccines are safe. And there was a woman up in Washington State who died from measles last spring, and the vaxxers leapt onto it saying, see, measles is deadly. You've got to get your vaccine. You've got to get out there. Then it turns out this woman had the measles vaccination. So here we have a case of they're wagging this dead woman to sell the measles vaccine. Turns out she had it. And now they're thrashing her and saying, well, her immune system was compromised for other reasons. It couldn't possibly be the vaccination that did it. Now, the part they're not mentioning in all of this is that this woman's death is the first measles death in the United States since 2003. But the U.S. Vaccine Court, which compensates victims of vaccine injury, has acknowledged over 100 deaths from the measles vaccine last year alone. And the big pharma shills are all over the net trying to shout this down. Oh, you're a Luddite, you're this, you're that. You know, if vaccines had a reputation for safety and efficacy, the debate wouldn't even be happening. The big pharmaceutical corporations can't survive selling medicine to sick people. Besides, sick people get sicker, they die, and then the families sue. The business model today is to convince perfectly healthy people to buy medicines they don't need. It's just like the traveling Wild West medicine show. Scare you into buying medicine you don't need. Now, there's a study that just got published in the Journal of the American Medical Association Pediatrics that has drawn a correlation between extremely low birth weight infants and vaccinations given to the mother. And they're basically saying that, and not just the mothers, the babies themselves, when they're given this onslaught of all these vaccinations at birth, they have lower birth weights and adverse events like dying. And by the way, the big pharma shills are out there screaming, oh, you probably think vaccines cause autism. Read the package insert on the vaccines. The FDA has mandated a warning. This vaccine can cause autism. Now, the U.S. Congress is going to go one step further. They're looking at what just happened in California. And rather than deal with a state-by-state forcing of us to buy something we don't want to keep their campaign contributors in the big pharmaceutical industry happy, the U.S. Congress is considering mandating vaccinations for children across the country, and not just children. They're going to mandate vaccines for adults. You will all have your 40 to 50 mandated shots, no matter how much it costs you. And it's all about keeping the big pharmaceutical corporations in profits. Now, over at the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they're still out there saying the best way to prevent pertussis is to get vaccinated. However, a new study published in BMC Medicine by Santa Fe Institute is basically saying that vaccines are transmitting the diseases. When you get a vaccination for measles, you are infectious. You can give measles to people around you even if you are not symptomatic. Over at St. Jude's Hospital, they will not allow people who've been recently vaccinated to visit any of their patients because they can give the disease to people whose immune systems are already compromised. Following the introduction of the whooping cough vaccine, the spread of whooping cough across the United States doubled. The rate at which it spread doubled following the vaccination campaign. Now, Jim Carrey, who used to be involved with the lady who runs this autism website, and he's come on out there, and he's saying this vaccination law is nuts. He says it's all corruption. All the people in California were getting huge amounts of campaign donations from the big pharmaceutical companies. They are selling your children to the medical companies. It's a giant open-air medical test. It could end as badly as the Tuskegee syphilis experiment. Well, we'll just stick this in them and see what happens. Oh, I guess it doesn't work. Well, we'll improve the product for the next generation. And Carrie makes a very good point. We're being told that mercury in fish that we eat is dangerous, but injecting mercury into our children is perfectly okay. It doesn't make any sense, and I applaud Jim Carrey for standing up there and making this point. And let us not forget, a former Iowa State University scientist who altered blood samples to make it appear he'd achieved a breakthrough in HIV has been sent to prison. Scientists in and of themselves are not to be trusted. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. I got to do Jim Goddard's show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow here on the Genesis Communication Network. Until then, stay safe, stay informed, stay skeptical, make good choices. Call your local talk radio station. Point them at gcnlive.com. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.